Hey everyone, welcome to the Worship Artistry Podcast. My name is Jason Houtsma, and with me,
I am Nick.
And we're not going to be playing guitars today.
Well, that's why. What?
Well, I played a guitar today. We do a lot in this studio
you told
space.
Me that we were going to play guitars today.
I did not.
That's how.
Maybe you misinterpreted what I said.
Okay, my bad.
We are actually not going to be playing guitars in this podcast.
Okay.
We actually have more than just guitar players listening, so
cool.
I know that for a fact. So we want to branch out.
All right, fine.
Do other things.
Okay, so what are we doing?
Well, today I talked to Sarah Kroger.
Oh, very cool.
If you're not familiar with her, she is a solo artist. She does kind of a mix of like some congregational stuff and some more introspective pop sort of sounding things. And I actually met her back in October.
Okay.
I was recording an Anchor Hymns project there, which I still like. I can't believe I got to do that. I think it's still going to come out unless they cut me. They might. It's possible.
Wouldn't that be something?
Just like, I'm so glad I went all the way out there. Oh, Zach Boland sings this song now. All right, cool.
Oh, yeah, right on, yeah.
Which, who knows? Anyway, let's not talk about that because we never know. Never know. I'd be okay. I was definitely the weakest link there.
No, you weren't.
But met Sarah, loved her voice, loved her heart in the songs that she was singing, and had actually knew that she was coming out with a record. I knew that there was some buzz around it, and I was looking forward to hearing it, and got a chance to listen to it, and actually was really kind of surprised at the content of it and really what it was about. And it felt like it was a window into her life in a way that I feel like a lot of Christian artists don't let you in.
Okay.
And so yeah, I gave it a listen, talked to her, and we had a great discussion.
Well, very cool. Cause like, I guess I don't know much, but I haven't watched it yet, but I'm about to, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm very excited to see what she has to say. If it was like, whoa, this was a little bit more different than I thought it would be.
What do you think it's going to be like?
I have no idea yet. I'm just excited to watch it.
All right, well, let's do it. Welcome to the podcast, Sarah.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat with you today.
Well, I've been looking forward to your work for a while. As I told you a second ago, just Andrew Osinga had told me it was going to be great, and then to get that Dropbox folder and get to listen through it all, man, it's kind of arresting, in terms of the content and the way you put the whole thing together. And I'm just really excited to talk to you about it because I think we need this kind of music. And of course, I love your voice already. So it's just whatever you sing will be fine. But you actually did something amazing. It's incredible. So can you tell me a little bit, just talking about, why this album right now? It seems like it's like an album of a time in your life. I feel like it almost feels voyeuristic. Like I'm listening to it and going, wow, I feel like I'm getting to know you in some really incredible ways, just with the honesty of it. So can you tell me a little bit, why this album and why now?
Yeah. Wow. You're so kind. I really appreciate that. And thank you for taking the time to listen to it. Because it's obviously very important to me and special to me. But this album I started writing for it in 2021, officially, but it was really after the pandemic started. Like that's what really started this whole journey towards this album. And like in the span of one day, like all of us, life shifted on its axis and in the span of a day, like my events for the year got wiped off, and I was like, what am I going to do now? And in order to ground ourselves, my husband and I started taking walks in our neighborhood and literally walked through the seasons day in and day out, like watching the trees change in front of our eyes, like kind of like watching grass grow, which seems boring, but at the time it was just like really grounding for me. And it became this season that my awe and wonder at God, at his presence, at the way that he just sustains life around us without us having to even think about it. Just the grandness of God and his presence in my life. I just was overcome with wonder. And then at the same time that I was walking through this like resurgence of wonder in my life, I found myself also, like flip side of that coin, found myself really wrestling with a season of wondering for the first time in my faith life, like first time ever that I couldn't easily experience the presence of God, really for the first time in my faith journey. And all of these questions started surfacing. I mean, it was a really difficult season for many of us, the pandemic. It was such a shift and such a monumental thing that happened. So I guess it makes sense that it would lead to that, but it was really startling and scary. And I felt a lot of shame around a lot of the questions that I was having and doubts that I was struggling with, and couldn't understand why God felt distant. And it was just a really difficult, terrifying season. And I feel like I'm just now in the last couple of months kind of like feeling the other side of that a little bit. Not feeling it all resolved, but feeling like, oh, there's a purpose to that desolation and that desert that I walked through. And kind of this like unraveling season of just like starting to pull on some strings that I just didn't understand. And theology that was never good in the first place, like some things that I picked up along the way, like things beliefs about God that were never true in the first place, and just like a real season of shedding bad theology and bad ways of thinking about God and bad ways of thinking about myself. And it was really hard work, but it's been really also beautiful at the same time. And so this album is kind of, in a way, it feels like a collection of psalms from the past several years of my life, like songs that speak to the glory of God, and speak to these aspects of his nature that are really hard to understand and that are a mystery in and of itself. And then also songs that, like Psalm 22, say, my God, why have you abandoned me? Like psalms from the pits of despair and lament and questioning and wrestling and everything in between. So that's really what this project has ended up being. I never, ever intended that it would be that from the beginning. I never knew that it would end up that way. I didn't really have like a set plan in my mind. It was just like, I'm just going to write from what I'm walking through. And it's felt like it's turned into, like I said, like a collection of psalms of sorts. And it's really been a blessing to me and my faith life to make this album and to listen back to it. It continues to bless my own faith life, which is, I don't know that you can always say that about an album that you create, that it does that to you. So I'm really grateful for it, and I hope that other people can, when they listen to it, find their own pieces of their story and their faith journey, and recognize that they're not alone if they're also wrestling with faith and with God right now in the midst of it.
Well, that's one of the things I love about it. I feel like it's, if I could take a snapshot, I feel like you took a snapshot of my life like about 6 years ago, like literally
Wow.
that journey of that experience. And, you started off with the song No Filter, that's just asking all these, very, very hard questions in very, like a certain kind of poetic way in which it feels very plain spoken. Like it's not couched in all these metaphors. You're just like, I have this question, I have that question. And it's like, yeah, that's the way that I ask questions, but in the midst of it, it feels like there's a thread through the whole thing, in which I found out in my own wrestling with faith and existence of God and all those things. I found the key to it that just kept me from completely falling apart was still that desire to know God, even while having that question. It seems like that's a thread that really kind of goes through the whole thing. It's like these questions, but if you want me, you can have me. Like, it's really, really beautiful. Did you was that like an intentional thing that you saw as you were going through, or is that something that you kind of looked back on and went, oh, wow, this was a thread through this story?
Yeah. I love that, that reflection on it. And I agree with you. I think that that's a big part of it. I also think for me, what has helped me through this season is remembering my relationship with God, the history of our relationship, all of the ways that he has showed up in my life that that science can't explain away, that other people can't explain away, that my questioning and doubting can't explain away, like tangible experiences of God showing up in little ways and big ways and a million ways. And just like looking back on that and recognizing, okay, I might not be able to feel you right now. I might not be able to hear you right now, but that doesn't mean that you're not there. Silence does not equal absence. And like, it's been a season of redeeming silence for me in a way. Like silence sometimes is God's language, and recognizing that we can't control, like we can't control God. Like we can't control the ways that he shows up or doesn't. And there is a plan that is grander than anything we could come up with on our own. recognizing again that God uses it all. God uses the mountaintop experiences and the deserts and the valleys and everything in between. Like, he uses it all
Mm-hmm.
for his glory. The process for me that's been hardest is like surrendering to that and trying to surrender my own control of how I thought faith life was supposed to be, and what a practicing Christian is supposed to be, especially as a worship leader, as a person in ministry. I was like, how am I supposed to do that when I'm questioning myself? And but that's what's been so beautiful about it, is that I've brought my honesty into worship. I've tried to
Mm-hmm.
bring that honesty into those spaces where I'm leading people to an encounter with God, and recognizing that there are probably people in the room that are wrestling with the same
Mm-hmm.
thing, and learning how to worship from lament and from a place of joy at the same time isn't easy, but it's necessary. That's the human experience. We're all fighting battles that no one else can see and wrestling with our own things. And yeah, just trying to continually surrender that to God, and step into faith, which is believing in what you cannot see, over and over and over again. So I'm just trying to do that. I'm just trying to step into what I cannot see, and yeah, continually allow God to redeem it, and try to teach me what it is to be a disciple. That changes over time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And faith journey is a journey. That's what it is. It's good days and bad days.
Yeah.
I've had more bad days recently, but I believe that good days will come again, so.
Yeah, it's funny that word deconstruction is kind of a buzzword, right? Everybody's deconstructing their faith, and it's like, I've done that myself. But at some point, you have to grab those blocks that you go, but I know this is true, and I know this is true, and build up something, and it's usually a lot smaller. You kind of build something, and it's like, it's just like these two blocks stacked on the rest of them. And I'm just like, you kind of hold that together, right? And just go that. How does community play that role for you? I mean, you talk about, you have a song where you're like, I think one of the questions, I don't have the exact quote, but it says something along the lines of like, is it okay that I feel closer to God in nature than I do in church, in a church building? And, you kind of mentioned things about, you're not a sermon, you're not a story for a sermon, you're not a theory to be proven, you're not a weapon of coercion. Like, God has been used in so many, like really negative ways. And I think we see that a lot of people just like see that and then just go, I'm out. Like, well,
I'm out.
What has kind of held you in place in that process? Because those are all, I recognize every one of those things going like, and but I'm still here. Okay.
I know. Well, I think community, you mentioned it. Community has been huge for me in this season. Like, finding those people who are safe for me, that I can be honest with and say, I'm wrestling with this. Does this make me crazy? Like, I don't know what to do. And I have been met with nothing but mercy and compassion and kindness by people over and over and over again. And people who are walking with it, walking with me through it, and just saying like, there is something I'm telling you, there is something on the other side of this that you would never get to, fruit on the other side of the season that you would never get to if you tried to escape it, if you tried to, skirt your way around it, if you tried to whatever. The Lord is using this time. And so having people that are speaking into it, and like, has just made me feel less alone in the dark, has made me feel like, okay, I have like other people here. I'm not alone. This is not God turning away from me. This is not whatever it might be, whatever you can make up in your head of what this season might be, seasons of desolation. Like, God can use it as a tool. And if you look at like believers who have gone before us, saints who have gone before us, I mean, David being one of them, who wrote these Psalms from places of devastation, and like recognizing again that, Jesus tells us, you will have trouble in this world. We just don't like to talk about that. We just don't like to focus on that. But it's like, whether you believe or not, you will have trouble in this world. Literally, you will. That is one of the promises of God. We will have trouble, but we are not alone in that trouble. It's funny, we were talking about the anchor hymns recording before we started talking, and We were both at that gathering. And before we started that night, I believe it was Ashley was leading us in prayer. And she was just like, everyone just take a moment to try to listen to what God is speaking to you. And I was in the midst of this time where I was like, God isn't saying a single thing to me right now, but I'm going to be open to it because Ashley says to be. And I just sat there and for the first time in maybe a year, I just heard the words, I am with you always. Mm-hmm. I am with you always. And I just instant tears. And that was all I needed in that season, is just remember mm-hmm. that God, even when it feels like he is silent, even when it feels like he has removed his presence from your life, you are not alone ever. Yes, we will have trouble, but we are never alone. I believe that. And for whatever reason, I am tethered to God. I can't sever that tether. It's just there. It's happening, whether I like it or not. And sorry to get emotional, but that's been so encouraging to me in this season. I am with you always. Sometimes that presence is another person. Sometimes that presence is a conversation. Sometimes the presence of God is nature for me. Sometimes he meets us in a million ways. And it's all about opening our eyes to the presence of God, that it's bigger than just a moment of worship. It's bigger than just a moment of prayer. God is present to us through all things at all times. And that has been maybe the most redeeming part of this experience to me, is like blowing my boxes and the borders that I put him in out of the water, and recognizing that he's so much bigger and so much more present than I ever dreamed possible,
Yeah, it's amazing how it's such a risk, right? It's really scary to take a step and go and start asking certain questions, right? Especially if you've been raised in church, or you've that's been your culture, or maybe you came to faith later, but usually there's like a zealot period, like there's kind of like these seasons and stages, right? And inevitably it seems like you do get to a faith or a moment where you're like really question, like, am I crazy? And I love that you point to your history, because I know for myself that you say in I'm not giving up, you say it's because I've seen so much, and I know in my own life, being able to go back and go, man, I can explain a lot of this, but I can't explain that away. And I've seen God work in this way. And I remember, in my own life, one time just even like praying, I'm like, God, I had this picture of like this like shallow, empty well. And it's just like, this is my faith right now. And I just felt like God like ripped out the bottom of the well to show that it was like, you have such a deep well, that I just kind of let go of. Like I just hadn't focused on it. It was like, well, no, look at my life. Look at everything that's been a part of it. Look how God has walked me through all these things, even in times that I couldn't necessarily see it. And so when we're in those quiet, those times of silence, it's like, no, he's still there. He's still present, and he's doing the things. And so I think it's, for you, as you've walked through it, like so you were saying like, I lead worship. I'm I'm a writer, I'm an artist. It seems terrifying to try and walk through that when you have things tied to it, right? Like, and even it's interesting. I've watched some other people kind of struggle with their faith very publicly, which then makes you kind of second guess, like, okay, well, but then nobody came to your concerts, and now all of a sudden you're like, actually, I believe in Jesus again. You're like, wait, like, why? Okay, it's hard for me not to go like, what is this connected to? For you, it's part of your career. But it's interesting with this record, because it seems like you're asking very brave questions, but it seems like you process through some of it. It's not like at the very beginning you're just like, well, forget it all. Yeah, I figured everything out, and it's all nuts. And then you come back 3 albums later and go, actually,
actually, I don't want to throw that baby out with the bathwater.
Exactly. So what was it for you? How did it feel for you to put all these thoughts down into song and then make that public? Like, it feels very,
absolutely terrifying, especially because, just to be honest, up until like maybe just a month ago, I was still in the midst of just despair with it. Honestly, I was deep in desolation still, and felt like I wanted relief. And I was at the time that I released No Filter, I was like, I'm I still very much feel like I'm in this season. I don't know how to talk about the hope behind it, but now looking back on it, I mean, honestly, in the last like 2 months, I've felt like a shift internally, spiritually, and it's not all resolved, but it's been through community and like being honest about it and being open about it, and even releasing that song and getting messages from people who say, I'm so grateful that I'm not alone in this. You've made me feel less crazy. Like I'm wrestling with the same thing, and just recognizing like we're not alone. And I've been, experiencing just the inklings of the fruit of this season of walking through desolation. And so that's enough for me to be like, okay, I can breathe a little bit easier. But like, it was terrifying. It was terrifying even to write that song. I remember writing it and being like, no one's ever going to hear that. That was just for me. Like, it's way too vulnerable. And then my label heard it and they were like, well, that's going to be your first song because people need it. And I was like, you're crazy. I don't think so. This is a really rough season of like cancel culture. And I was fully expecting to just be like heaped on with hate. But it has been the exact opposite. It has been so many people just saying, thank you for writing a lament song, because I needed it. I needed it in that season I needed like people having conversations like this about being open and honest about the ups and downs of faith, and recognizing, man, thank God I am not alone. Thank God that desolation is a tool sometimes that God uses, and remembering that, being reminded of that it's not always like the evil one that's like distracting you. Sometimes it is, but like sometimes God uses this to expose the places of our heart that lack trust, that we are trying to control, that we are trying to master. And it's like, well, there are some things in life, again, faith is believing in what you cannot see over and over again. And for me, it's just been that journey of like humbling myself before the Lord and recognizing there are some places where he's inviting me to trust on a deeper level than I ever thought I was capable of. And so in a strange way, I'm grateful for the hardness of the last 2 years of this season of desolation. I'm grateful for it. A couple of months ago, I would not have been able to say that. I was still very bitter and really struggling. But I'm grateful that now I can at least start to see the inklings of the fruit of a season like this. And honestly, I'm not scared to share this record anymore. I was for a little bit, but there's treasure to be found in the midst of some of these really dark, hard seasons, even suffering. The Lord uses it all. And so I'm grateful for it. I really am. And I'm grateful for this record. This record has really honestly been a huge gift to me and my faith life. Listening back to the mixes, listening back to the songs has been a gift to me in this season. And so I hope that it's a gift to other people too in the seasons that they're walking through.
Yeah. I mean, it's so powerful, and it's just,
Thank you.
I think it's really important that people feel seen and not alone. It's like, it's like, I can listen to that. Like I said, I can listen to that record and I can go, man, I can see so much of different seasons in that, and kind of walking through that thing. But it's so terrifying to open that door, right? And then you realize like, oh, God is like so much bigger on the other side of this door.
Much bigger.
Turns out I didn't know anything. And if you tell me you do, I will tell you you're a liar. That's kind of, at this point, I'm like, you're trying to sell me something. So
that's good.
So for you, well, let me ask you this. So I think, my thought is we're probably going to see more of this. I think about the people in the Anchor Hymns community and what you're doing. And there's clearly I've heard people, let's see, how do I say this? I've heard people say that, it's like, oh, things start to take off because God is doing something in the larger church. And, usually people say that around like, oh, this song took off and we all needed to sing this song, that sort of a thing. But I look at these types of songs, right? It's clearly connecting in a way because we're having these thoughts, we're having these questions, and not always like that's not always answered. I know it's kind of all across the board, and I don't say like, oh, these people are further along or anything like that. It's just a matter of like, hey, we have to be able to ask these questions. Your label being supportive of you putting out No Filter as the first, actually not even being supportive, going, actually, we're going to do this. I
Yeah.
mean, when I think about Christian music over the last, however many years, I don't think of, oh, this one's a really challenging song that asks these really hard questions. Let's put that out. Like, are you seeing kind of a shift even in the industry of music being more, especially like faith-based music, being more open to kind of have some of these discussions?
Yeah, I definitely see that. A lot of my friends in the space and writers that I really admire and respect are asking these questions in private, in conversations that we have and in writing spaces. And especially like the younger generation, I feel like it's automatically happening in a lot of the younger artists that I see. They're releasing these songs that are just authentic, that are just like, this is where I'm at. I just don't know sometimes, but I'm choosing to believe,
Mm-hmm.
um, and that's really helpful because that is just the reality. Like we keep talking about it. This is the reality of faith life, is that it is up and down and all around. And some days are better than others. And I feel like for so long, it's just been like, oh, let's just talk about the good, the happy, the things that are going right, because that sells, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's easier to sell. If I'm being
When
honest,
I'm
like
going through
it's
the
easier.
storm, let's just talk about a storm. That's very impersonal, and everybody can relate to a
Yeah.
storm,
What does that even mean? And,
I don't
like,
know.
but I still believe you, like, and always having to resolve in a song, always
Mm-hmm.
having to have some kind of answer to the problem. And it's like, yeah, I get that. I get that desire. I get that need. That's like on a human level. We want like answers to our questions, and we want things to be resolved and have like a pretty bow around it, because that's nice. That's peaceful. That's easy. It's like, but man, that is not the human experience. That is not majority of the human experience. Things sometimes take years to resolve. If that, there are questions this side of heaven that will never be answered,
Mm-hmm.
that don't make sense. We can't make sense of suffering a lot of times. God has used it to redeem things in my life and to make me the person that I am today. And I don't wish away any of the suffering that I've walked through, but it still sucks, and it's still messy, and it's still hard. And sometimes there are days, and for me, it was like a year or so, where I could not listen to those songs that resolved. And I was like, well, good for you that it's resolved, but it hasn't resolved for me. So I think it's just recognizing that that's just a part of the
Mm-hmm.
human experience and the faith experience and the faith journey. And I really am encouraged with some of these younger generations, and even just in the space in general. I'm really encouraged with how many people are starting to write from that place. So many people that I
Mm-hmm.
respect, and releasing those songs just for the human
Yeah.
experience. And yeah, we're just recognizing that it's normal. And yeah, I definitely think there's a shift happening, and I'm grateful for that, because again, it's faith. Faith does not equal everything is rainbows and butterflies. Again, the Lord said, He promised us, you will have trouble in this world. So just continuing to write from those
Yeah.
places, I think, yeah, I think the future is bright for Christian music.
Yeah. I think when I looked at, listening to the song "Glory Be" was a song that I thought was really powerful from the standpoint of like, especially where it lands in the record. You just had these couple like really challenging things, and you're like, "But
Yeah.
God, you are this,"
Yeah.
and it seems so perfectly placed and perfectly sung, and a reminder. Like I always think about like congregational music. Like we can ask
Yeah.
all these questions, but then we sing truth and things that we know
Mm.
to be true. And so listening to that song it's like I love that you didn't just go, here's my questioning record and I'll leave nothing there. Or you didn't turn it into like, oh, I figured it out. You just kind of
Yeah.
went, but God, you are this, and you are
Yeah.
to be glorified. And like I think those pieces sometimes get missed when we start going through when we have the like, okay, here's the confessional stuff. It's like we have to
Yeah.
still have no, but there's an anchor to grab onto. Like this, we know this to
Yeah.
be true.
There is truth. Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So let me ask you, what was it like writing that song in the midst of all these
Yeah.
other songs?
It's so interesting. That was one of the first songs that I wrote before I even knew what this record was going to be. I grew up praying the Glory Be prayer from a young age. I had it memorized. So it was always something that I could pull from and use when I like just didn't have the words to pray, and just needed something to say, because it's kind of the perfect prayer of just all glory be to you, God, in every action, in my weakness, in my strengths, and everything in between. Let the glory be to you. And so I always thought that that would be great as a worship song. And I brought it to my other writers and we wrote it in like an hour. I mean, it just kind of came. And it's so funny that you say that it comes in the exact right place in the record, because we spent so much time trying to figure out the order of this record, and not wanting it to feel like just all over the place and kind of like, it is all over the place. There, like I said, there are songs that are from the pits of despair and songs that are just like proclaiming the glory of God and trust in him and faith and full of faith and everything in between. But like when you look at the Psalms, that's exactly what it is. It's Psalm 22, my God, why have you abandoned me? Followed by Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. It is all over the Psalms. It's all over scripture. It's just the life of a Christian. And so I really, my goal with the worship songs, the corporate worship songs on this record, were to write about the attributes of God, the things about God that you just can't explain, that you just can't understand, and that lead you to a place of wonder and fear of the Lord, because I feel like we need more and more of that in the worship space, if I'm being honest. I feel like we've gotten really comfortable with telling God who he is, and telling him how he's going to show up in our life. And I just wanted these songs that were more like, I don't know. I don't know, but I know that this is truth, and I'm going to proclaim this truth over my life and over this church and over whatever space I'm singing this song in. And I just believe in the power of proclaiming truth. I really do. And so I agree with you. That's really what that song is all about, is just trying to declare the truth of God, even in the midst of a season where it feels like you don't understand any of it, you know? So,
well, and it is that thing of, it kind of grabs you in that, like I talk to my kids and like, the Bible just rings true to me. When Jesus says things, it rings so true. And so it's like sometimes saying those things, singing those songs, it's like, man, even though I can't tell you why this is, and I just go like, I know in my soul this is true, and I have to sing this, and it comes from that different place. And I think it's an excellent song.
Thank you.
So let me close with this. So you've made this record. I think there's, anytime you make a project, right, you're thinking about, okay, where does this live? What is this? Where does this music live for people? How do I get it out into the world? What are people going to grab onto? Like for you, it's very personal, but then there's also songs that's like, I could totally sing with my congregation. Like where in the listener's life do you see this album living? Does it live in multiple places? Is it more for me to just sit with my headphones on and walk through the woods? Or is it, are there songs for me to grab and sing with my congregation? Or do I challenge them to sing this really hard stuff and go like, what do you think? Where do you see it? Where do you see it?
I think it lives in multiple places. I think it lives in, at least for me, it has. I've sung some of these songs in worship spaces, in corporate worship spaces. I've sung them in the shower by myself. I've sung them in my car by myself. I've put on my album as I'm walking the beach in nature, and just like allowing myself to just kind of get caught up and swept up in the music and the sights that I'm seeing and everything in between. So I hope that it lives in multiple places for people. I hope that churches will sing some of these songs with their congregations, and I hope that people will use these songs in their private prayer too. And just in general, I hope that people hear their own faith journey reflected in it, and can take a life of its own in people's lives. That's the dream, I think, ultimately, is that obviously these songs came from my own reflection on my own perspective and journey with God, but that people can put their own perspective on that is really such a special part of art, making art and sharing that art and allowing it to take on a life of its own in other people's lives. And so, I hope that it does just that, truly.
Well, I'm excited to listen to it more. It's wonderful.
Thank you.
Really, it was very I listen to a lot of things, and sometimes something just jumps out at you and you're like, just get excited about like, oh, that was good. Oh, that was good. And it really is, it feels like a complete work, just from the standpoint of, it is a journey. And it's hard. I feel like it's hard now. Like we want to grab onto one song and go, okay, what's the single? Okay, here's the song. And then make every judgment about the artist and the music by this one song. And it's like, well, Paul didn't just write one letter. Like he wrote a ton of them.
Yeah.
You know? And so as you're, I would just highly encourage everyone actually listen to this in order, the old school way. Don't just grab a single. Listen to the whole thing. It's fantastic. And so thanks for sharing your heart about it with us. And really glad we can do it. Hope to do it again soon.
Thanks so much. You're so kind. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having the convo with me.
Well, I wish I was in Florida right now.
I do not. But wow, what an interview.
Well, it's okay because you're as far away from Florida as you can be.
Literally.
Without going to Alaska. In the U.S.
I'm safe.
It's okay.
But seriously, what a great interview. I really didn't expect that.
Yeah.
That was very neat. Yeah, I really liked what she had to say.
Yeah, I think the thing that's interesting is, she's not done with the journey.
Yeah.
Right. She's not coming to it and saying like, this is who I used to be. Like, which we tend to do, right? We tend to not share things until we're already past them and going, and here's what I've concluded, and don't worry, everything worked out fine.
Sure. And
she's kind of in the midst of it, but at the same time, still really hopeful and still clinging to God, which I think is the big difference.
Right. Yeah.
So let me ask you this. So how do you feel about songs in the church that kind of go to this level? Worship songs we tend to congregationally, they're all very safe.
Sure, yeah.
I feel like, we listened to that song No Filter, earlier, and it was like, man, this doesn't feel safe. And so, like, how do you feel about songs about doubt and questioning and all that?
Yeah, like, I guess, like, me personally, or from, like, the perspective of, like, the church, would you?
I think both.
Both, okay, yeah.
You're part of the church.
For sure, yeah. So me personally, I welcome these kind of songs. I welcome like questioning, doubts, praise, love, even like times of like, what is happening? Like just almost anger. You're frustrated, you're whatever. I mean, it's all emotions. It's all like these feelings we have, but like they're very real oftentimes. And it reflects like what's happening in your life. Like when my dad had cancer and died. Holy cow. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I questioned so much. I had so much doubt in my life. And I, would go to church and hear all of these songs that are very great. They're great songs. But, like, in my life and in that time, I wish I had something like No Filter.
Yeah.
Because it's like, man, I'm not perfect. I'm far from it. I'm tired of acting. Like everything's perfect and I don't want to be this way anymore. And it was very hard for me to go to church at that time. And even after, honestly. But yeah, I absolutely welcome those types of songs because they're real. And I think God wants to hear that from us. I think God wants to hear like our woes, like, maybe no, I stubbed my toe, oh no, or stepped on that Lego or whatever. Those stink. I'm sorry,
but they're painful.
Yeah, but there's way worse things, And so I am tired of acting like everything's perfect and having this like filter on and everything. And as like the church as a congregation, I think maybe the first time they heard something like, I guess if you want to use the word honest, like that, they. What? Yeah. I thought it was all happy, joy today, and just, well, all this other stuff is real too.
Right.
So I don't know. Does that make sense?
Like, yeah, it does. It's interesting because I think culturally we're coming to a place where it's okay to talk about all that.
Yeah.
And because there is that expression of, this is my actual reality, right? It's one thing to be aspirational with our songs. I always think of worship songs as, we can question all these things in the message and we can have discussion but our songs kind of bring us back to truth. But at the same time, I think it's really important to be able to put words to things that we're struggling with and be able to say them rather than to struggle in secret.
Right.
I know for myself, I had a period of time where, I have like very little reason to doubt God. Like I see his work in my life.
Sure.
And at the same time, I struggle with it all the time. And it's like, I don't like that about myself.
Sure.
But that's the truth, And I remember there was a number of years actually where I had been like going through this journey alone. I hadn't talked to anybody about it.
Mhm.
And I finally like told my wife, like, I don't think I believe in God anymore.
Wow. Yeah.
And she was like, what?
Just out of nowhere. Yeah.
Well, how did you get here? And so you start working back and you start saying things out loud and you realize, oh, like I'm not the authority on this, and not that somebody comes in and says, oh no, here's the right answers.
Sure.
But, I remember saying to my pastor, which I work at the church, and I do worship artistry. And I'm like, I don't know if this is going to mess up everything.
Right.
And I go, man, I don't think I believe in God anymore. And he goes, how old are you? I was like, I'm 39. He's like, that sounds about right. And it just made it so that I could start expressing those things.
Right.
And I think it's amazing when we have community that can do that. But I also, I think songs like this kind of help us have those words and open up those discussions, because the truth is God's not scared of any of those questions.
Right. Yeah.
So why should we be?
Exactly. Yeah.
So I'm stoked. It's funny. It's cracked me up that she was like, yeah, when the label said this is going to be your first single,
Right. Yeah.
like, okay, we've come a long way.
Yeah.
we
have.
We have come a long way from the like, how much JPM is there in this song? How much Jesus per minute?
I was like, do you mean BPM?
No, that was an actual thing.
My bad.
I learned about that from an A&R guy
That's
once. So I was
amazing.
like, wow, that's like an actual thing.
That's amazing.
So I think that open honesty, still with humility,
Yeah.
is a good thing. Yeah. So check out Sarah's record, A New Reality, which is out, I believe, yesterday from when this is released. So it's great. Sometimes we get interviews and they come out before the album, and you're like, check it out. It's coming up sometime.
It's whenever.
We're out. It's ready to go, and it's a good one. I hope you enjoy it. And if you want to check out how to play some songs, you should go check out Worship Artistry. We've got 21-day free trial, over 700 songs, bass, drums, keys, all the stuff. And also, I'm starting to say this now. I used to just say subscribe to Worship Artistry, but now I'm saying subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Yes.
And ring the bell.
Do it. Why though? Why do we ring the bell?
Because maybe it'll shoot confetti out of it.
What if it doesn't?
Have you seen the new gift that when you click the bell button?
No.
Check it out.
Okay.
Do it.
You should check it out.
Check it
too.
out. It's pretty amazing.
See
We'll
ya.
see you next time.